Soldier Marvel series. Remember, that's right. Falcon and Winter Soldier. Jesus Christ. Falcon and Winter Soldier Marvel. Good morning, Minneapolis. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wow, we're here to learn and get to know our world better, even though it may be on fire. Come on in. We're happy to have you here today. Click like or subscribe if you haven't. If you want to donate to us, you can click on the link in the description below. Description. Words, we're off to an amazing start. Let's go. In obvious news today, if you're wondering, why did my friends post all those memes and confetti about some guy named Henry Kissinger dying? I don't understand who Henry Kissinger is. There's a reason they didn't teach who the Henry Kissinger was in AP US history, but we will help you out a little bit later in another episode of Good Morning Minneapolis. Just stay tuned. Speaking of occupation, colonialism, and attempted genocide, you're seeing what's going on in Gaza, and it's a lot. It really is. And one thing you may be wondering is, I wonder how neighboring countries are dealing with this. You don't just sit in your apartment while a genocide is going on next door and not do something, right? You're either actively blocking it out and cranking up the TV, or you're getting the broom and hitting the ceiling like, yo, cut that out before I call the UN. Wait, the UN won't do nothing. Just cut that out or I might have to step in. And one of those neighbors to the current genocide taking place in Gaza and the West Bank is Syria. CNN writes, U.S. and coalition forces at mission support site Euphrates in Syria were targeted by a single rocket attack on Wednesday, November 29th, a U.S. official said. The rocket did not hit the base, the official said. There were no injuries or infrastructure damage reported. Wednesday's attack is the first since. It marks at least 74 attacks on U.S. and coalition forces since October 17th, when the first occurred in the wake of Hamas's attack on Israel. Okay, this part actually isn't that complicated. The U.S. funds Israel. Israel occupies Palestine and is currently committing genocide and an ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Palestine has a strong historical bond to Syria, as they were together under the Phoenicians, subjected to wars and occupations by various empires, and Syria is sitting right next to Israel and recently reported that Israeli airstrikes have been continually hitting their airports in the capital city of Damascus and their airport in Aleppo. So you're in Syria and you're seeing the homies of the people that just airstruck your airport, and now you're wondering, maybe these Americans are in on this too. And maybe they are. Al Jazeera writes, the United States has carried out 2 more airstrikes in Syria against facilities used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its aligned groups. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the precision strikes targeted a training facility near the city of Abu Kamal and a safe house near the city of Mayadeen in response to continued attacks against U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq. Okay, so the U.S. has 900 troops positioned in Syria and 2,500 in neighboring Iraq, and you're wondering why? Well, this goes back to young Biden saying,
there's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region.
And you can look at it as an overt attack on Syria and maybe look at it as an attack on Iran. Think of it like this. A guy's walking into somebody else's house to address a guest at their table because that guest used to tell that guy to get off their lawn. Now that guy can't approach the guest directly because that would mean war, but that guy can approach the guest when they're at somebody else's house. You're also stopping that guest from amassing weapons, even though you nearly own all of them in the world. You just want to make sure nobody tries to get out of pocket because you're a little bit insecure, even though you got the USS Gerald Ford pulled up outside the club. And hopefully that gives you some context as to what's going on outside of Israel on the border. We're going to get back to that in a little bit. Speaking of home raids, the BCA is getting sued. Last month, Communities United Against Police Brutality held a press conference regarding families affected by police brutality having to wait for information regarding loved ones who have been killed by police. The Strip writes, 5 families who are still waiting for information about loved ones killed by police are suing to get that information from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. They claim the BCA broke the law by not providing them information from completed use of force investigations within 10 days of their request. Some things you may not know about the BCA. They were created in 1927 to help Minnesota law enforcement investigations. It was one of the first DNA labs in the U.S. in the 90s, and they are incredibly effective in finding killer cops.
Innocent. Always innocent.
Oh, and their superintendent, Drew Evans. He mildly resembles John Walker from the Falcon and Winter Soldier Marvel series. Only difference is I believe John Walker has a character arc where he begins to do the right thing instead of be a villain. We don't believe Drew Evans will ever grow out of his villain stage. He's stuck there. So what's going on? What's the holdup at the BCA? They're supposed to be one of the most sophisticated bureaus and can't seem to turn around information to families whose children were just killed by cops. You'd think the BCA would provide this information quickly, right? Jill Oliveira, the Department of Public Safety spokesperson, which is a fancy way of saying that Jill is kind of like the Jimmy Hart for the cops. You know the manager in pro wrestling that was the mouthpiece for all the heels? That's Jill. So if anybody gets shot by the cops, Jill basically says, How dare that person get in front of their bullet? Now look at this poor cop is traumatized. How dare you? Jill O'Vera sold this propaganda to the Strip. We understand that families who have experienced these tragic losses would want all of the information that they can have as soon as possible. Once a case is closed, the BCA must review every report, image, audio, and video in the case file to ensure that information that isn't public is removed as required under Minnesota law. Damn, Jill, you really tried it with this one. To ensure that info isn't public is removed. And it's a tough job for Jill. She works for the cops who are more used to redacting people, not information. What information isn't public, Jill? The racial slurs that cops use when they're referring to people of color, the misogyny they practice day in and out on the force. Or maybe it was that cops racially stereotyped Christmas tree in 2018 that we weren't supposed to see. Was that not public information, Jill? Oh, I know, it's the private contracts they get to sign to work as bouncers sitting in their cars on dating apps while soaking up the money of small businesses. That must be it. Jill, how long does it take to redact a file? Hop into Microsoft Word, delete some words, and just send it out. I used to work for PBS, and they would just delete the whole video of conversations about racism, and they have way less money than y'all, and they're way faster at deleting things that indict them. And if that's the case, Jill, why did it take 3 years for them to report back to the family of Dalal Eid after the BCA killed Dalal and then raided the home of his family, essentially destroying the place and leaving it in shambles? And here's where it gets weird. The BCA holds on to the clothing and belongings of people killed by police. Many, if not all of these families who lost loved ones to killer cops haven't even seen the shoes or belongings of their loved ones. The BCA is just holding on to it. And here's where it gets weirder. Some law enforcement agencies will hold on to evidence of people they've assaulted as souvenirs, like those weird cops in Antioch, California. You can Google that. So to Drew Evans and the rest of the gang at the BCA, we know it's tough to investigate yourself and your cop friends and do the inner work it takes to do the job the state of Minnesota pays you millions for. But I believe you'll most likely get better at it. Not because you want to or even because you're being sued. You'll most likely turn these investigations around quicker because every major media outlet in your backyard is now watching and paying attention. And also because Kristen Clark is swirling her tea right now, Drew Evans, while surveilling your office, homie. The DOJ got that DOG in them. Pay attention, Drew. Pay attention. And to the families suing the BCA, we here at OnSite wish you the best of luck. And speaking of the whole world watching, Palestinian journalist Motaz posted on December 3rd that the circumstances in Gaza under Israeli occupation and airstrike have grown more dangerous now than ever. Motaz writes, "The stage of risking everything to bring you the news has ended. Now begins the stage of trying to survive. I brought you enough news, as God is my witness, in order to save my country. We are now facing an internal siege. We can't move north or south. Israeli tanks surround central Gaza on both the northern and southern ends. Our situation is more dire than you can imagine. Remember, we are not content for you to share. We are a people facing genocide. We are a cause attempting to stay alive alone." According to the Palestinian health minister on December 5th, more than 15,900 Palestinian people have been killed by the Israeli government. That number includes more than 6,600 children, at least 77 journalists and media workers, at least 281 medical staff, and 112 UN staff, with over 40,000 injured. All this, and you think the U.S. government or one of the powers that be could call for a ceasefire, but instead, we get this.
But this word genocide is getting thrown around in a pretty inappropriate way by lots of different folks. What Hamas wants, make no mistake about it, is genocide. They want to wipe Israel off the map. They've said so publicly, more than one occasion. In fact, just recently. And they've said that they're not going to stop. What happened on the 7th of October is going to happen again and again and again. That's
National Security Council Speaker John Kirby accusing people of using the word genocide in a flippant manner, and then he himself proceeds to go ahead and use the word genocide flippantly. And regardless of where you stand, genocidal intentions are significant in this situation. However, as the late Michael Brooks stated, there's no symmetry in the military relationship between Israel and Palestinians. Israel has one of the most technologically advanced, modern-day sophisticated armies in the world, while Hamas does not. So when people say a genocide is taking place and then refer to U.S. President Joe Biden as Genocide Joe, the correlation is in direct response to the reality taking place in Gaza, which is the genocide of the Palestinian people by the Israeli government. And to the reporters and journalists like Motaz on the ground in Gaza, showing the truth of what's happening there, we wish you well and may you return home safely. That'll do it for us here at OnSite Public Media's Good Morning Minneapolis. I've been your host, Toussaint Morrison. Yes, the G stands for Good Morning. Thank you so much for tuning in, and click the description below if you want to support more work like this, and even if it's just for the price of a cup of coffee that you would pay for. It all helps. Thank you so much for watching, and hey, justice, then peace.